Yeah.
Hey, everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Leese here with another edition of the Surf and Sales podcast. I'm really excited about this guest because I just sort of learned of Sarah maybe in the last couple of months, but it's Sarah Brazier from Gong. And the cool thing we just found out before we hit record was that Brazier means small fire. And if you pay attention to anything she does online, there's always a little bit of a fire in her belly. Like you can just tell. So we're really excited. So Sarah, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we could finally chit chat about the wonderful world of sales.
Yeah, so we're gonna flip this around because usually at the end of our show we'll ask people, hey, how can we help you? Is there something we can do for you? And I sort of gave you that heads up, and you said, well, I just need more leads. And we're like, wait. Granted, this is April 21st, and the world's in an unusual place. We thought, how could you need more leads? Like Gong is supposedly one of these companies that's just hitting it all the time. So, without throwing anybody under the bus over there, because we're good friends.
You mean Russell or Udi?
Yeah, Udi.
Wouldn't dare mention their names.
Right. How are things going? How is business for you guys?
It's going. I think that everybody's making changes, and I think it seems like the conversation is really like, if you can adapt quickly to the pandemic, and if you have something that can still help people out during the pandemic, then you still have a shot at selling. But I work enterprise accounts, so I'm working with companies that are like 1,000 employees to 7,500 employees, and like everybody's got a spend freeze or a budget freeze or a hiring freeze. And so that's like the objection that I keep coming up against on all my cold calls is like, I can't evaluate anything because I don't have a budget anymore. It's frozen.
So and it's less about needing more leads and more about how the heck do I overcome that particular thing.
Or you could send me the leads of the people who actually have money.
You just need the Glenn Gary leads.
Right.
Yeah, someone, if anyone's got some money in their back pocket, I'm here. I got a gong, I'm gonna sell it.
How are you adjusting to that though, right? Because this is the quintessential question of how do I talk to my customers beyond telling me to be more empathetic, beyond we had a conversation Scott and I did last night with John Barrows, and it's kind of like, please stop with the I hope you're well and your family's safe and healthy. Like, we get it, we know it. But is that just us being grumpy old salesmen? And I do mean gender specific. Or is it, no, that's kind of true, Richard. Like I've moved away from that.
Yeah, well, I kind of was not doing it in the first place because it always feels empty when someone is clearly reaching out to you to prospect you. And they say something along the lines of like, hey, I hope you're doing really well. Like, I'm always like, you don't know me. I don't know you.
Right. So what do you do? So how do you approach that?
Yeah. So the way that I've been thinking about going about my prospecting and my outreach is it's different. It's different for the emails that I send versus the cold calls that I make versus the LinkedIn touches that I have. I think all of those are like uniquely different. So on cold calls, like the first thing I do is I say, I know it's a weird time to be making cold calls, but I am an SDR and I have to keep doing my job. So can I just tell you what we do? And then you tell me if it's a conversation that you're interested in having. And that's just like my first ask on the call. And typically people are like, sure. And I've been having more people pick up the phone and having longer conversations with prospects. It's just a question of like, do they have the bandwidth and the emotional energy? And because I don't think that the budgeting freeze is like a true reason why they're not taking the call. I think it's literally just like, I'm talking to people who are running these massive sales teams and they've all just gone remote and they're not convinced that Gong is like going to actually like help their team out. And so I just think I have to get better at objection handling.
Well, I can tell you as somebody who's led teams, maybe not of 5,000, but hundreds, I would not be surprised if a lot of that right now is just I'm worried about so many different things right now. I have zero fucking bandwidth to try to think about any new thing whatsoever. So
exactly.
I'm not sure that it has anything to do with like whether Gong has value or not. It's just like, oh my God, I can't even deal with some other new idea, you know, right now.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the vibe that I'm getting from people when I cold call them. And like, I don't think anyone's opening up their emails. I'm sending emails just because I got to send emails and it helps me with my cadences. And when I send an email, what I do is I go and I go back through and I check out people's like quarterly earnings calls. And the first thing I do is I search their transcript for COVID-19 or coronavirus or any of the variations. And I just see if they've started talking about it. And some people haven't had a quarterly earnings call yet where they addressed it, because when they did start, like it was their last call was like before that.
They're all starting this week. They all start this week, right?
Yeah. So. And so I've been going through and trying to figure out, okay, like, have they been talking about it? How are they talking about it impacting their business, and using that in my email messaging? Or just trying to figure out what the priorities are. What is their CEO saying on these calls? And then sending messaging around like, this is what your CEO is saying. So, so if they say it's important, then you should.
Just out of curiosity, because I know that you probably have this process regardless of the current situation. Mm-hmm. Because you're going into enterprise and this comes up all the time, how many accounts do you prospect in a day? Granted, there could be 7 people at that account, right? Like, you know, because it's not 100 dials and 50 emails. I can't imagine you're able to use that level of output. Like, what is your output like at the enterprise?
Yeah. So like I spent yesterday morning putting together a sequence. I'm looking it up, which is why I'm not looking at the camera. I put together a sequence. It's like 16 touches over phone, email, and LinkedIn. And I found everybody at that company that could be a potential prospect. And I made the messaging specific to some stuff that their CEO was talking about on their quarterly earnings call, the last one that they had. And he did mention coronavirus, and he talked about a couple different things that some people would say would be like the problem, but how they could use them to their benefit, of like, these are challenges that everyone's facing. So I like put together my first touch email, and I sent it to like 50 people. And one of my prospects, I know she forwarded it to her entire team, and they opened it like 50 times. She still won't take a meeting with me.
But how long did that take you? And is that one company, or is that 10 different companies?
Yeah, that's one company. And it took me, I don't know, it probably took me like 20 minutes to find that stuff from their quarterly earnings call, because I use a tool called Sentio, and it's not a tool for salespeople. It's actually a tool for people who are like trying to invest on the stock market. And it sends you all Sentio. It's so cool. It's great. It's kind of like Seeking Alpha. Do you know Seeking Alpha?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, except it's better than Seeking Alpha, and it's got a better search function. And so I just go through and I just look at like whatever press releases are coming out from the company, because they have all of that collected, as well as like all of their transcripts from their any kind of investor relations call. And yeah, so I use that, and you can create alerts, and I'm probably not even using the tool to its full like functionality. But if you're working enterprise companies, like publicly traded enterprise companies or strategic companies, it's definitely worth checking out.
So what are you having the most success with? What channel is having the most success for you right now dealing with these enterprise?
Actually, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like the best spot right now.
So
what's it 2 months ago? Sorry, Scott.
What volume are you putting out on LinkedIn? Like, how many? Is it connection requests? Is it in-mails? Is it just engaging on other people's posts? And to what level? Are we talking about like 10, 20, 200 a day? I'm curious real specifically about that stuff.
Yeah, so what I do is my flow is like research the company, figure out what their problems are. So that's like 20 minutes. Put together this email sequence that has phone calls and LinkedIn touches. And then send it out to all the people who should, based off of their title and what their LinkedIn says, care about what this email says. And then I send that email, I send a connection request, and then I cold call them. So after this like podcast that we do, I'll go and make all my cold calls. I've got like 80 calls I need to make today. I'll probably skip some of them because I bet some of them I'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have put you in that sequence. Oops, my bad. But so then like when I connect with people, so I'll just send a connection request on LinkedIn. And I stopped adding notes because I read somewhere that only like adding a note to a connection request only increases the likelihood that someone will accept that request by 2%.
Yeah, I can tell you who wrote that, and I disagree with him big time, but go ahead.
Okay, interesting. Well,
wait, who wrote it, Scott? Come on, this is our podcast.
Jake wrote that.
Who did?
Dude, I could call out anybody, but you don't have to push me. All right, Jake Dunlap wrote that, and I told him I disagreed with it. Yeah, I still disagree with it. If I can get a 0.02, if I can get a 0.02% lift at scale, I will do it every single time. And as somebody who gets hundreds of connection requests, I don't even bother looking at ones that don't leave a note. Mm-hmm. So I guess it just depends who you're going after. If you're sending connection requests to people who have a small network, it might not matter. If you're sending connection requests to somebody who's maxed out on connections, you better fucking send me a note, because otherwise I'll never even see you.
So Sarah, there's your challenge, is you have to, go and now do it back Scott's way for 25 of them today and see what happens.
Yeah, I'll play around with it. I'm happy to play around with it. But
it depends who you're sending it to, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm sending it to a CRO of a 5,000 person company, I know that they're well, first of all, they're probably not using their LinkedIn. So if they are, I'd be super lucky. There's a couple people who are, and it just depends, because you need to go check. You need to check like what's their activity level. Like if someone doesn't have an activity on LinkedIn, if they're not even liking, it doesn't mean that they need to be posting. They need to be like liking stuff or engaging with stuff.
I feel like you have two mouses and you have multiple screens and you're like checking LinkedIn on this side and you're checking your cadence and sequence over on this side. Like you're dialed in.
I think I don't even look at, I understand why you're looking at the activity. I don't look at the activity only because it takes me like an extra click. If I just look at your profile, I scroll down and see how many followers you have. And I can tell based on how many followers you have, whether or not you use LinkedIn on any kind of consistent basis.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, anyway, not to get too into the weeds. I send connection requests, and then whoever accepts them, then I try to start a conversation. And I think like
start a conversation, because that is the annoyance, right? That at least in our world, right? Don't send me a connection request, and then when I accept it, send me a meeting request, right? Like, how do you transition that?
I try to just have like a really casual conversation about either something they posted or something they liked or something that's happening in their company or some kind of current event. Just like anything that's just like, I don't like saying like, hey, how are you? Or like, how's your day been? Because I feel like that feels very ingenuine.
Do you ask for a meeting in that first conversation?
No.
Or do you try, that's the key. You're not asking, you're trying to add value and create relevance.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to talk. My thought is like, I just want to talk to you and figure out if it's even worth trying to pitch you.
So I have a question for you. What will you do when you have reached your connection limit? Because you won't be able to send connection requests anymore.
Are you talking about when
there's a 30,000 connection limit on LinkedIn, right?
Well, I've got thousands of connections to go.
You're eventually going to hit it, and based on the way that you've built your brand and all the content that you put out consistently, you're going to hit it faster than you think. But then you won't be able to do this strategy that you're doing right now of sending people connection requests. So I'm curious if you've thought that far ahead about what you will do. Like, I cannot send a connection request. I have not been able to send one for years. The only way I can is if I go in and delete people and remove connections. So I'm curious if you've thought about that yet in any kind of context or depth.
No, I haven't thought about it too much because it hasn't like posed a problem. Because I mean, like I just haven't been like, I mean, I've only
by then, Scott.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, fair.
Hopefully I'll be working like SMB accounts and I'll be an account executive and it'll be different and it'll all be great.
Sarah, when did you start posting on LinkedIn?
like, I don't know, sometime at the beginning of it was at the beginning of Q4 of last year, very recently.
Okay.
Like it's been a little over 6 months.
And how long did it take you to feel like you started to get traction?
Well, that was the weird thing is I posted on LinkedIn once and like really like wrote something that was like something I posted instead of sharing something that Gong had asked us to share, or, you know, some kind of, you know, Devin Reed article or something. But I posted once and it just like blew up. I've never had that much traction since, but it got like, I don't know, like a couple, like 10,000 likes and several hundred comments, and it had like 1.5 million views. And then suddenly I had hundreds of connection requests like that just came in for days. And suddenly I had a following of people. And then I posted again, like a day later or 2 days later, and that got hundreds of comments and thousands of likes. Not as many as the first one, because I think I posted something not very interesting. And then that's just how I built a brand, as I accidentally stumbled into
overnight success.
Yeah, I was like, hopefully not a one-hit wonder, but it's kind of like, hey,
what have you learned about that since then? Like, so now you're into it 8 or 9 months. You have ridiculously great following. You understand the social game. You know, you've even gotten creative in the way you write textually. What are your 3 biggest takeaways so far?
So I think, as specifically as an SDR, I think what building a brand has done for me is it has opened doors into conversations with people who typically don't want to speak to me. Like, nobody wants to talk to an SDR, because an SDR is asking you to take a meeting that you don't want to have, to go probably sit through a demo that you didn't actually want to see. So you have to be really good as an SDR to get the meeting, to get someone to pay attention to you, to come to, you know. So typically, like, what's really happened is that there are people who now follow me who belong to companies that are in my book of accounts, and I can just reach out to them and start a conversation. And typically, because they follow my content, they feel like they know me to some degree, and they feel really comfortable sharing things about their company or the struggles that they're having, and are also willing to like give me introductions to people. So that's pretty.
I think that's a really, really great point that you've made right there. And I haven't heard anybody frame it that way. It's like, once you have a brand, people feel like they know you a little bit, and then they're therefore more willing to share details about themselves and about their company. And that helps you learn more about them and what their needs are, and therefore helps you, you know, throughout the sales process and that buyer's journey. That's really interesting perspective. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I've gotten like pretty much booked all of my meetings for the past couple months, for the past pandemic. Almost every meeting that I booked has been through.
Just out of curiosity, and if you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but in the last 30 days, right? So it's April 21st, right?
Yeah.
2020. In the last 30 days, how many times have someone tried to recruit you?
Oh, probably like a couple dozen. I don't know. People try to, for some reason, people try to.
in 30 days when massive layoffs are happening, and I want people to understand this, like, that people, one, are still hiring. Mm-hmm. They're looking for quality, right? And they will come to you and how much do you think your brand has built that?
I think my brand has built that almost entirely, because I would get hit up by a recruiter before I had a brand, you know, maybe once every couple months, you know, when I feel like companies go through like binges of needing more SDRs because it's such a high turnover role. And the longer you've been an SDR at a company, the more recruiters are like, this person probably knows what they're doing.
Well, they also recognize that your expiration date is coming soon for being willing to be an SDR, because you most likely want to move to be an AE.
Yeah. So I would get hit up, you know, a couple times, but then when I started having a brand, I'd get hit up all the time. I'd get hit up for not just SDR roles. I'd mostly be hit up for account executive roles, a couple times like marketing roles. sometimes recruiting roles, or SDR leadership roles, just kind of like all kinds of things.
So this, and I think this is a testament to Gong, right? What makes Gong such a great company that you're not really trying to leave, right? Because I'm sure people throw money at you.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think that there are like a couple things. The first thing is that I like what I'm selling, and I like who I'm selling to. I really like talking to sales leaders. The second thing, and I think it's like the more important thing, and it's more a testament to the company that Gong has built, is the leadership is really fantastic. And like a couple examples of that is like Gong is all about empowering you to do things outside of just your ordinary job if you want to. Don't have to, but if you want to, you can. So when my first like 2 weeks into the company, I think it was my first week into the company, I found that they were shooting a music video, and I was like, I want to be in that. And they're like, oh, okay, sure. And then they made me the lead singer in the music video. And then,
I didn't realize that was you. Oh my gosh, that's
yeah,
hilarious.
that's
That's
me.
amazing.
Yeah, I don't sound good. It's not very good sounding, but that's okay. They let me do it. And then I had been talking to Amit, our CEO, in the kitchen, and like Amit knows my name, and he like talks to me, and he asked me what I had done over the weekend. And at the time I was producing a series of shows in San Francisco, in like the sort of some dingy theater. And I was like, oh, I was, hosting a show that I had produced. And he said, well, why aren't you doing a show for Gong? And I was like, I don't know, why not? And he said, you need to do one. And then he walked me over to Udi, and he said, I think that Sarah should do a show. And Udi said, okay, come up with something and then you can make it. And that's where I came up with my Life After SDR series. And so suddenly I did that before I ever got like, LinkedIn famous. I had just this idea for a series of what can you do after you've been an SDR? And they just let me do that. And then I wanted to run a blood drive. So I ran and organized a blood drive, and I didn't have to like ask anyone for permission or go through a bunch of like hoops. They were just like, yeah, sure, we should run a blood drive, go for it. Or I thought that Gong should have a band room because there's a ton of people who are musicians. And so I was just like, hey, Amit, I think it'd be cool if we had a band room. He was like, yeah, go for it. And then I saw him like later, and he was like, where are all the instruments? And I was like, well, I don't have a budget. He's like, $5,000, go for it. So I like bought $5,000 worth of instruments and set up a band room. And like, now we have a band room that no one can use because we're all in shelter in place. But it was like those things where I was just empowered to do, like, if I saw something and I thought there should be some kind of change, if I just brought it up with someone, as long as it made sense, it wasn't gonna like wasn't gonna burn the building down. They're like, yeah, go for it. Do it.
You mentioned producing like theater shows and stuff. Tell us a little bit about your early life and the winding road into sales.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So
were you a theater kid?
Yeah, I was a theater kid. I was really a speech and debate kid. I was like a mega speech and debater. So, but like I did the act. So speech and debate is a very complicated activity. And most of what speech and debate is there's debate, but then there's speech. And speech is limited preparation events, it's public address events, and it's also interpretation events. And the interpretation events are all acting. And so that's what I did. I was like an interpreter, and I did a little bit of public address, and I wanted to do limited prep, but they were like, you're not good at that. You can't. No, thanks. So I did speech and debate through high school. I was really bad, but my sister was a state champion. She's 5 years older than me. I have 3 sisters. So two of my sisters are state champions, but my oldest sister was, and I was like, I want to do that. So I worked really hard, and I eventually won states, and then I went on and got second at nationals, and that got me a scholarship to do speech and debate for Western Kentucky University. And they have a really good speech and debate team. And so I did.
Did your sisters ever place nationally?
My sisters didn't place nationally. My oldest sister, Ginny, didn't go to nationals because she was doing auditions.
And so is that a source of pride for you? Do you like to remind them of that?
I wouldn't want to start a fight with my sister. That would just make it miserable. She's still older than me, so she can remind me of all the embarrassing things that I did when I was little. So that's like, it's
You
just
still,
rather
you
not.
still, you still came in second place at nationals. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. But that opened a lot of doors for me. And so I did speech and debate, and then I ended up working for the National Speech and Debate Association. Then I coached speech and debate at a private school called St. Mary's Hall. And we had a couple national finalists. And then I was like, I'm tired of just like coaching other people to be good at acting. I think I'll go be an actor. And my brother works for a company called Twilio, and he lives out here in the Bay Area. And so I could either live with him or the sister who teases me. She lives in LA, and I thought, I like him better. He's nicer. So I went and slept on his futon, and I was an actor in San Francisco for 2 years, which basically meant I did a bunch of odd jobs, and I did a lot of shows, but I didn't really get paid. And that's how I ended up in sales, is because I was working 80, 90 hours a week as a barista and the front desk girl at a startup. And I was those 2 jobs because it had free food involved. And then I'd go to rehearsal till 10, 11 p.m. at night. And I was really tired. And I thought, I bet I could make more money and like actually save some dollar bills.
How did you choose sales? What clicked for you to go, you know what, I think I want to go do that? Because I would assume you could have gone to marketing. You could have you've got a personality, right? Like there's, you've got something there. The speech and debate thing seems to, whether you want to write copy or edit copy or be in sales, what made you choose sales?
Well, sales has the lowest barrier to entry. Like marketing people are like, oh, you are a middle school teacher? You can't come here.
They're too good for us.
But if you tell someone like, oh, I did these gritty things. I was barista and I got up at 4 a.m. and I used to jog to the BART station so I could open up the coffee shop at 4:30. And, like I got a lot of burns from all that coffee I spilled on myself. They're like, oh, great. You're going to wake up early and make dials? Awesome. You can come be on our team.
What do you think would happen in other departments if they lowered their barrier to entry and took more chances on people the way sales leaders take chances on people who've shown a lot of grit and done a lot of odd jobs and, worked their tail off? I'd be curious if what customer success teams and marketing teams would look like,
I think that it would I think that they would probably have better teams. I think we know, because science and data says that when you have diversity of background, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of gender, then you end up producing more revenue, especially as those people move into leadership positions. And I think, I think, you need to have, you need to be qualified to be a doctor, but I think that a lot of the qualifications to be in customer success or in sales or in marketing, at least at the entry level point, have more to do with your ability to A, be gritty and work through challenging moments, B, think creatively, and have, some critical problem solving skills, and C, communicate. And those are all soft skills. So
It's interesting. You said earlier you're an introvert, yet you chose sales, right? But I can also see too, I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody who's done debate to the extent you have. And I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, I should go to every college who graduates kids from the debate team and put them on the sales team. That's
you
just
100% should.
Smart, right?
Yeah. That's like the best problem solving. It's so much critical thinking.
When did you go from, okay, this is lowest barrier to entry to, oh wow, I like this. This is cool.
It was at Gong. So at my first company, it was not fun. I didn't have a lot of, I was just bad. I was just a bad SDR. I made cold calls. I had all these connects and I couldn't convert them to actually sitting down and having a meeting with me. And then if they did take a meeting with me, I had to qualify the call even more and get all of this critical, I had to get my BANT. And then I'd be like, oh, finally. So if I could get someone to take a call and get BANT with me, that was very rare. And then from that conversation, pass them to an account executive, that was even more rare. And 3 times it happened, it was like a DQ'd meeting for, they didn't have pain. Be like, what are you talking about? They talked to me for 20 minutes on the phone. They seemed interested. What do you mean they don't have pain? I didn't have any conceptually what those things were. And I, would sit down with my manager and he'd be like, what's your forecast? And I'd be like, I don't know. Well, what's your commit? I'd be like, how am I supposed to commit to a number that I don't know how I'm going to get? I have no idea how to do that. I feel dishonest promising that I'm going to get a certain amount of meetings when I have no idea how to do that. I'd be like, well, Sarah, some people, art is, or sales is an art and a science. And sometimes it's a little more art than science. And I just don't know if you're cut out for sales. And I thought, you don't fucking know anything about art. I am an artist. I am an actor. I have directed. I have produced. I've been in shows across this country. Don't tell me what a fucking art is. Like, oh God, it made me so mad. And so I just go back and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. But I was terrible. And then somehow like Gong found me, and I was like, well, they seem like if they're selling a tool that's supposed to make you better at sales by showing you what the top performers are doing so you can replicate it. That's literally what Gong does. Either they're lying and it'll just be a fresh start and I'll just kind of like struggle there too. But at least they haven't like watched me be crappy for 9 months, or they'll actually be like, I'll get all this coaching and training that I've been hoping to get. And it turned out to be like the latter, but more. So it wasn't until like I started getting wins because I started getting coaching.
What other questions can we ask you where you'll get that animated? Because that was awesome to watch. For those of you who are listening, you need to go watch this video because this was a good one. So.
You just have to tell her she can't do something. She's got a good chip on her shoulder like some of the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, I'm the middle of 7 kids. So
7?
Yeah,
7, Richard.
Wow.
That means you have 5 more kids you need to produce.
No, I'm done. I'm done, buddy. Right after
Notice I said you. I'm not doing that. That's crazy. Oh my gosh.
So that I can only imagine what holidays are like. And on top of that, at least 3 of them are very good at debating.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's where they practiced.
Exactly.
They practiced
He's got to fight to have literally a voice at the table.
Oh my God.
What is there left? What is there left for you to learn? And not just you, but what is there left to learn for somebody who's been an SDR and been successful and is working enterprise accounts, right? And I'm just always, I worry that sometimes people get stuck and pigeonholed in the SDR role, and companies don't promote fast enough to AE or take a chance on people and move them to AE. I'm just curious, like from your perspective, what is there left to learn that would suggest that you are not ready to close deals on your own, if anything?
Well, I mean, I think there's always stuff to learn, right? Like there's always.
Yeah, but specifically to the role that you're in.
Are you trying to force my hand and say, Gong, I should be an account executive?
I'm just asking you a question. This is something that I'm like, the reason I asked the question is it's something I'm pretty passionate about, because I personally have like for years been very reluctant and resistant to creating SDR, AE structure and roles in organizations, because I felt like it was a disservice to SDRs because we weren't teaching them everything that they needed to know about sales. And that if somebody was a really good SDR, they're going to potentially get stuck because people would be unwilling to move them out of that role and advance them into an AE role. And 3, they don't give them enough opportunities to actually demonstrate the skills required to be an AE, so they can continuously just say, well, I'm not sure you're really ready yet. So I'm just curious, as somebody who's done well for themselves as an SDR, you're working big, huge, multiple 1,000-person company accounts, you've built a brand for yourself. Yeah, maybe I am asking you, like, what the fuck is there left for you to learn in your particular role? And what is there that would suggest you are not able to or would struggle to close deals on your own? Because I, from the outside looking in, have a hard time believing it.
Well, I appreciate that. I think,
sure.
First off, I think, like, I think if there wasn't a pandemic happening right now, I would be closing deals.
Good.
But there is a pandemic, so you gotta adapt. You gotta adapt. But like that being said, I completely agree with you. I think the problem that I think there's a couple problems with the wonderful world of sales development from what I can tell, just from people talking to me on the interwebs, because I'm a listening ear and I'm an SDR, and just from personal experience. But I think that like one, we don't do a good job of, like, we as the sales community don't do a good job of preparing SDRs to become account executives.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
And you know, like in order for me to become an AE at Gong, I have like a pretty intense interview process that happens. The first 45 minutes is me running a discovery call with like a couple different personas in the room. And I need to make sure that I like achieve a couple different goals. Like, first of all, just getting to the main challenge and pain that the VP of sales has, confirming that it's the biggest like priority that they have to achieve all year, being able to attach that to some kind of number, and then like I'll go and close them to get next steps. And typically like they'll make that part challenging for you. So I do that, and that's 45 minutes long. And then the second 45 minutes is I have to present my 30, 60, 90-day plan. And you know, tell them how I'm going to hit quota when I've never been an account executive before. So
This is a great question. I always love asking founders and CEOs how they plan on taking the company public when they've never done it before.
Yeah. What do they say?
Well, they just give you that look like, how dare you ask me that question? And then I just look back at them and I'm like, now you understand how I feel.
Yeah. I don't think I'd be allowed to look
You can
audacious.
just you're an actor. You can figure out how to put on the face that fools them, and you can, you know, be thinking that even if you don't display it.
Yeah, totally. So I just went and interviewed a bunch of other account executives who've been SDRs
Sarah,
before.
I'm happy to volunteer. I bet I could speak for Scott. We're happy to let you role play with us. Happy to, you know, we're going to come in and we're going to teach you how to be super aggressive like us, and just say, don't ask me that question. So,
So anyway, that's what I got to do. So that's the interview process. And I feel like there's just got to be a way to prepare SDRs for those kinds of conversations. And you know, I think we just need to do a better job of making those conversations, having those conversations. Yeah.
Given the current state of the world, right? I know Gong and you guys culture's huge, right? How are you guys trying to maintain that culture? What are you seeing the company do? You know, do you do the Zoom lunch where everybody just eats a sandwich on camera? You know, anything cool that you guys are doing? Just because I want to share that with other people. Like, I think people were looking for those ideas.
Yeah, we're doing a couple things. Yeah, we have our lunch and learn. We've always had a lunch and learn on Tuesdays where somebody presents something interesting, and anybody who's like new hires, you know, we do 2 truths and a lie and all that stuff. So we've moved it to remote. We have monthly happy hours. I think they're bi-weekly now, but we have a happy hour. It happens on Thursdays after hours that people can go to, and they can drink on Zoom. And then there's like a couple different things that I think are super funny that they're doing. There's a Zoom cooking on Zoom, and a different gongster teaches how to make some recipes. So one woman, she's Lebanese, and she taught how to make like her home recipe for hummus. And then the Russian guy on the team had his drink was like a cool and refreshing drink, and the ingredients are vodka and water. So yeah, like people are just, there's like some funny stuff like that. But I think like it's challenging to maintain the same level of culture when everybody's chilling in there.
How do you work through the grind, right? Like, there's a grind to being an SDR, right? Because it's a repetitive process. You're sitting at a computer all day, you know. What are you doing to take care of yourself, physically, mentally, like, you know?
Yeah. So I read most of the Sandler book. You can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. And there's a piece of it where he talks about it like the whole time. He's like doing some like 1960s psychology, but I think that parts of it still stand, where we have to separate our role from our identity. So I'm I'm Sarah, and the role that I play at work is SDR, and those things are different, right? Like I'm not fully all of the things that I am in my role as SDR. And so when I experience rejection as a sales development rep, I don't really take it personally because it's just part of the job. And I think that like that's a big piece of how I get through the grind and how I get through like the repetitive motion is mentally separating things. I also I say that I like Ford motor my day. I always like, all the calls happen at one point in time, all the emails happen at one point in time, all the LinkedIn touches happen at another point in time, and that's how I can like maximize my productivity. I also like have a notebook full of all my objectives for the day, both as an individual, what is my identity goal versus what is my role goal. So like how many touches do I need in order to convert to a meeting? Like who do I need to be going after versus like my objective, my intention for today is to be respectful to my partner. So, and then you do a historical review at the end of the day, like, was I respectful? No. And yeah, like I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is drink a cup of coffee, and then I tell myself I'm going to do yoga. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And then I try to go on runs in the evening and sit outside. I think being outside is we know that the benefit of being outside is really good for your mental health. Things like that.
I think it's really hard. It's really hard for me, at least. And I've been fighting this half my life, if not all my life, but it's really hard to separate your self-worth from your productivity. And as somebody who's like a type A or hard charging, like super competitive person, if you have a bad day selling, or you have a bad month or a bad quarter or a bad year financially or whatever, or you're just not getting done all the things that you feel like you should be getting done, it's really easy to beat yourself up and get down on yourself about that kind of thing. And I think an unspoken thing that I think a lot of people are going through right now is everybody's saying, you got to be so productive during this time. You should be learning new things, trying new things, exercise more, read more, do all this stuff. It's like, man, I'm supposed to do all that and do my job at 100%. And then for me and Richard, I don't know if you have kids or not, but like, we're also parenting. Like, fuck, man, I gotta remember that I'm worth more than my productivity,
Yeah, and those things it's cumulative, right? Like we can't measure a lifetime in 24 hours, right? You can't measure like the value of a life, and you can't measure the impact of a life. And I think that those things, maybe it's because like of the way I was raised and just my life experiences, but I think like our value, we will never see the fullness of our own value, or how we impact lives. And if you take it from, what is my productivity and what have I done and how have I benefited from my action today, and you make it more about, well, how am I benefiting somebody else? And am I, and do I even know? Like, especially when I was a teacher, there were so many times when, I still have students who come back to me and talk to me about the experience I had in my class. And if I didn't have their name on caller ID, I probably would have forgotten who they are. So I just think that that's an unfair way to treat yourself, and an unfair way to think about measuring the value of your own life, because at the end of the day, I don't think that matters. I think it's more about how we treat people and how we talk to people and how we spend time with people that are immediately near us, that are immediately with us, and less about like, well, did I run my 20 miles this week? No, I came in at 18. Now I'm a failure. Like, no one gives a shit.
Are you listening to her? Are you taking notes on this? Because I know you.
She's life coaching me right now.
Yeah. That's really cool. I appreciate it. So, well, I know we've sort of gotten to the end. Is there anything you'd like to add or ask us? Anything we can do to support you? I know we asked at the beginning, but now that we've gotten to know each other, anything we can do for you?
Now that we spent some time biffling. I mean, just, if you know anybody who's got money and needs gone. No, I mean, I think
the best thing about that excuse, though, is that everybody, when this is over, will have a lot of money because they didn't spend it. So that excuse is gone. Don't tell me you don't have any money. You know,
I don't know. I've
just
been buying a lot of beer lately. I've been sipping on some IPAs, got a couple cases of wine. You know.
uh,
I,
go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, like, I hear that the people who have stopped spending money on clothing and everyone is buying like home fitness equipment now. So it's like, you know, people are always gonna find money to spend on stuff,
It's
even
funny
if
because
they're isolated.
I follow stocks and I invest in stocks, and everybody's like, "Oh, Apple, Apple, Apple." I'm like, "You guys are it's silly. Everybody's purchasing more on iTunes. It's about the services side, and they're about to roll out new phones. Everybody's not spending money on other stuff. They're going to go buy a new phone, right? They're going to
Yeah,
want the latest and greatest. So it's funny how that's happening, right? The
yeah,
American culture of things still breaks through, a pandemic. Right?
totally. We are.
Maybe you should prospect Richard with Gong, and that way we can dissect some of his calls and help his business
Yeah.
along a little bit.
I'd be thrilled to run a case study of have Gong dissect my sales calls. I had a heartbeat. I would do that.
There
Yeah.
you go. Awesome. There's your next series that you can produce, Sarah.
Right.
You can have a whole series with like
The
sales
different
consultants and what have you, and
Yep.
listen to our calls that are recorded and then just rip us to shreds how terrible we are.
You're probably a lot better than me. I'm just hanging out in SDR land.
It'd be terrible.
I'll send you
Oh
my
God.
calls. We can do it together. You're like, well, here's my call and here's your call, and
Always happy to. All right, Sarah. Hey, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for doing this. We're really, really glad to have spent some time with you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's been great hanging out. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show.
Of course, of course.
Take care.
We'll talk again very soon, I'm sure.
Yes.